Good morning, folks. I hope you can hear me well. And I'm really late. I was planning on coming on at 10 o'clock Pacific time, 6 p.m. Greenwich Standard Time or Mean Time, whatever they want to call it. And things are... This springtime allergy season has completely knocked me off my usual routine. Waking up with lots of congestion and sore throat and left earache. No fun at all. But I got my coffee. I made breakfast for the family, and we're here. And so I'm hoping that, hey Ray, how's it going? Good to see you. Today I'm planning on presenting something a little bit closer to what the original intent was. And first off, I want to introduce my, this is my Robert Fripp New Standard tuning guitar. The tuning is from a low C, so C, G, D, A, E, and then because they don't make strings thin enough that are durable enough, this is the minor third, the G. So, and it has, as I'm sure everybody recognizes, there's a lot of very interesting things that can happen with that tuning. And everything is a little bit out of reach for me. I'm still trying to get myself, objectively situated in a ergonomic fashion so that I can do these videos and I can record and I can also do all these and be able to create or extract music from the ether, as they say. And it's now 11:33 on the West Coast. It is a nice sunny day outside, we had a little bit of drizzle this morning, and but it's clearing up for nice blue sunny skies. We'll be warming the pool up a little bit later and let those kitties go outside to play. This morning I've opened up this project. I've got a good friend of mine. I've got several good friends of mine in Seattle who are doing some work on this project, and we've all been sort of restricted by this coronavirus item that's kept us isolated and indoors, or at least close to home. In one regard, from a work perspective, this is actually very enjoyable for me. I preferred not driving an hour each way in traffic, and that's a vast improvement from where I was before, which was like sometimes it would be 2 hours each way. But so working from home is a fantastic thing for me. Really enjoy it, and as you know, I've got this. I've already got this set up for the music thing, and monitors and camera, and I've got another camera in order because I want to be able to do a slightly different perspective in case I decide to turn around and play on the keyboards or show something over there. But the wonderful thing is that I've got everything already set up so I can have these wonderful video teleconferences with everybody. I'm going to try and keep my eyes open on the chat line. So if you got questions, feel free. One of the difficulties, I've seen Fernando Perdomo literally, like quite literally, restring his guitar, tune it to this tuning, and then immediately start writing and going live and playing and writing and playing something on in front of everybody. I don't have that kind of faculty to just sort of digest things, and so this thing has been strung up in this fashion for quite a while. This was a Craigslist acquisition. You can tell because it's all dinged up and stuff. It's definitely not in the best of shape, but and it's also a factory. I don't know if you can see it. It says second on there. So this is actually, it didn't meet quality control for the full price. So it got sold at a discount. I got it from a guy on Craigslist in Seattle who had this since the early 90s. So this is one of the original Korean-made items, and it's spectacular quality. It's really good. Some of the oddities about it are that the scarf joint on the neck is backwards. So normally you see the scarf joint especially on the Japanese and the Korean-made ones. The neck goes straight and the headstock comes this way. So the scarf joint kind of goes like this. This one, it's like they've continued the neck straight and then they've attached the headstock here, because you can see that line. I'm trying to see if I can get this to show. There's a line here. It's I don't know if that improves anything or not. But what it does do is I think it makes it a little bit stronger. It could be wrong. But so far it's been very solid. The guitar was bought from a guy for $100. It needed some significant upgrades to make it something worthy. So I've put on these. I want to say they're Planet Waves. Yes, they are. They're Planet Waves self-trimming tuners. I had a guy in San Jose put a new bone nut on and cut it, and I gave him the strings. These are like pretty wide gauge strings, so it starts with a 56, goes from 56 down to 08. I got these from String Love online. If you are interested in doing something like this, you can go there, and they will, because the tuning range is so wide, from a low C up to the high G, they will calculate the string tension. So they'll come up with a custom set of gauges that will keep the string tension even across all the strings. So I do have this written down somewhere, I just don't have it handy. So as I said, this is the C below E, G below A, same tuning D, A above G, E above B, so that's a significant increase in tension. And then even when you're going just from the E to the G, there, if you're just to use a normal, like a 909, it would snap probably, or come close to it. Finally, actually, this is a whole bunch of stuff. So there's the Planet Waves. I replaced the switch here with a nice high quality switch, Switchcraft, or I can't remember what it was, but a pair of Seymour Duncan humbuckers. This was a really old PAF that I had on the Svilpa caster, my old faithful neck through Strat. And this was I purchased one of the whole lot of humbuckers, obviously the bridge one, and then wired it up with these interesting Seymour Duncan pickup rings that you can. So this is in humbucker mode. This is one pickup. This is the bridge, or the bridge side. this is the next side. Doesn't sound a whole lot different, but then you can put them in parallel, and that's significantly different tone. So because I've been doing a lot of this sort of in this song, it's more of like a Tool King Crimson-y kind of thing. I've kept it in series. So another thing to know, because it's in fifths, if I just hold even hit a bar chord down like this, I'm playing an add 9. Makes police stuff a lot easier. So kind of interesting from that perspective. Also, your octave, just like a drop D, your octave is at the fifth fret for each string, except for the G, which is at the 9th. So, anyways, that's that. New controls went for the high quality stuff from Stu Mac, and the Stets bar, which is a tremolo that is, the whole piece sits on a bunch of Teflon and roller bearings, and when you move it, everything moves. Now, this is a pain in the ass to get tuned up. Even with the nut sauce on a brand new custom cut bone, it still goes out of tune. Anytime you do anything really wild with that. So to show you just how everything goes would put me out of tune, then I'd be sitting here for 5 minutes trying to get that all tuned up again. But it is a tune-o-matic bridge with the almost like a cantilever kind of system. It uses your original bridge and tailpiece studs for the mounting. So it was super convenient. I found it for super cheap on Reverb. Everything here, with the exception of the electronic controls and the one pickup, everything here was pretty much found on Reverb. So this is the true budget guitar. I do need to replace the straps and put in strap locks. So if I ever decide to go play live with this thing, if I get to that level of proficiency on it, I will have absolutely no problem. DAW image blocking view of that sweet guitar. Ooh, sorry. As I said, I will try very hard to keep an eye on what's going on. Sweet guitar. So there it is. Oh, and these are totally after stock. They're the speed knobs, not standard Gibson issue, but much easier to use. And I think that's it. I may have even replaced the jack, because the jack on all the electronics on the Epiphone stuff seems to be lacking. So let's just be honest about it. So let's actually give you some. So that's this beautiful instrument right here. This song, this was the very first song that I actually, once everything was more or less put together, I decided I was going to focus on learning how to play this wild beast, and so started messing around with it. Stuff like that. So here's, and then the most amazing thing about this is, so that's kind of, I've already got like a little bit of a sort of an analog course on it. But if you stick it through a rotary speaker effect, oh my God, it's just wild. So let's play you a little bit of this. And you get to hear it's going on the slow rotor right now. Again, playing with all these this now brand new chord voicings to me that would take some kind of elaborate stretch, which, you know, my hands are bigger than Donald Trump's, but they're not the biggest. So let's just be honest here, my hands are not the biggest. And being able to do these kinds of voicings and extensions with minimal effort is pretty nice. It does make it really exceptionally difficult to play conventional guitar though. Let's see. Now, to get these effects, I'm going to bring the rotary speaker back in, and I'm hoping you can actually see the animation of the rotors here, because you'll see at points right there. So you can hear it speeding up and slowing down. So again, just going to let you listen to it for a bit. Hi Colin, good to meet you. Right. So this is a piece that I called Hypnotic. It is one guitar. There was a bass, just a single note bass line that because I muted out the bass tracks and sent the rendering over to Sean Fairchild in Seattle, who's going to be who's going to be playing bass on this, and he's his band Combinator. If you get a chance to go search them up, they're fantastic. They've been an on and off thing, but they're going to be coming out with a new album pretty soon, just very impressed with them. I've been trying to find a way to get Sean involved in some fashion for a while. I think I asked him if he was available to play a couple live shows with us in Seattle like 4 or 5 years ago, but he's not. He wasn't at the time, and he put me in touch with other people, so which worked out. Everything works out in the end, as we always say. So the but at the end, so I'm really excited to have Sean on board. He's really very awesome. I'm just going to set up this a bit of a brick wall limiter here, so I'm not going to be blowing people's speakers out with this guitar because it's so powerful. I'm just gonna set up a clean limit. It'll keep it at a reasonable level. Again, this this whole beginning was like essentially I just picked this up from my I think his name is James, and I can dig it up for anybody who's in the area that wants a really good guy who he cut the nut, and we refretted the instrument with these like really stunning gold tinted frets, and they're like they're really sweet looking. and he did the fret level and everything in there. It is staggeringly good. The action is, as you would expect on any Les Paul, is really low. So it makes things a little bit easier to play when you do have to do any kind of these stretches. The other thing is, of course, no buzz. A lot of Les Pauls have that. A little bit of they fret out because people set them way low. And so let's take a coffee to help put some more gunk in my throat. Yum, yum. Again, that's what it sounds like. And so this was about a couple days worth of just messing around. It's one take. As you can see, there's no edits here. So I think I just turned it on and I kept going and going and going. The first 15 or 20 were just absolutely brutal because I was landing on the wrong frets and trying to do things that your muscle memory really wants to do. Finally, sort of taught myself that it doesn't work that way. You know, old man, I'm stubborn like that. So and it's also my chops were pretty rusty, so there are times where I want to do like an Alex Lifeson type you know, bring it back to more of a 4 feel instead of the triplet against the 4. It's been a long time since I've tried playing this, but I remember it, so I'm able to sort of fake it. Anyway, so that sat there alone and lonely for a little while after I got to take 32 and said, this is good. I'm pretty happy. It sounds great. I started messing around with it. I have there it is, the Complete 9 library. It's over my shoulder, my left shoulder, right shoulder, up there. And in there was an old favorite of mine, the Absinthe. The Absinthe was a really cool, if you can see it, the Absinthe for Native Instruments. Was a really cool synth. I don't even know how to describe it, but you can do, it had some of the coolest lead patches on it that I used on my very first CD effort, The Sound of Thoughts. Used it a lot on anything. I doubled up with, say, like a classic synth. So if there was a mini Moog that didn't seem to quite cut through, and back then I had the attitude of more is more. So more is better, and so I would stack synths. to try and get more power out of it. And the Absinthe did that. It actually did it really nicely. On the second CD, the fine line between a fine line between the V-Synth. I used to have an old first gen V-Synth that was updated to the version 2 software, and it was sort of substituted for the Absinthe, but I still use the Absinthe a little bit on some of the tracks. I know for sure that I used it on Lady in a Cage. There are some absolutely stunning sounds in there that have a slight chase. They have a slight portamento, or like that ability to go whoop, like to sort of drift up to the next tone when you change the note. And so with this powerful but wispy sort of thing to it, added so much character to the lead synth lines. But in here, I'm using it for this pad, and the pads in the V-Synth or in the Absinthe are wonderful. They, as you can hear, it's sort of morphing just like a wavetable. But I'm not sure calling it a wavetable is accurate. I think it just sort of incorporates a lot of the different technologies. So that adds so much depth behind, and then if we got the bass at the very beginning, just sort of added that one note in. So sat for a while. I was pretty happy with it, and I thought, well, it can't just sit there by itself. So needed to. I always had the intention of coming back to something that was a little heavier, and always wanted to incorporate a sort of a Tool influence in there. My son's insulin monitor keeps going off here. Anyway, so I've always wanted to incorporate this Tool influence in there, so this was the next stage. And that's that. And that's just octaves. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me try and remember that. This is a so this is cool. This was an idea because, again, being Tool influenced, I really like the I like how Danny Carey and Adam and Mr. Chancellor change time signatures like very fluidly through what would be normally just a hard groove or a hard riff. So this is the first time through. It goes like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 7, 8, 9. The second time through, it's 8, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it does this 3-bar that resolves to 8, or resolves to a standard 4, but it's 9, 8, 7. let's go back and listen to it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now this is just in plain old 5. Now I don't know what Sean's going to do here, but this is what my original thought was. And of course then a clean guitar over top. So it's like oh no, that's wrong. But it's the second time through is right because okay. So there's change there. There's things that happen that make it interesting. The chords change very slightly. I'm using the add 9 a lot, except in this case this is just a power chord. So that's C, C, and G, and then I've got the C, D, D sharp, F. And that's just a power chord F. D sharp, add 9. Then we go up to the second time through. When we start changing it up, it's just this F add 9. Just a simple power chord with add 9 on it. So everything's ambiguous, and there's no resolving major or minor third. There's just this add 9, which adds that, which is the same thing as a major chord dropped with a third drop down to the second. It was very ambiguous, and almost has that sort of menacing quality to it. So the bass guitar is essentially playing this it's almost like a melody line. And because I didn't want to have to change my bass into a new standard tuned bass, I just did a drop D on that. And then it gets a little bit freeform here. Wanted to imply that there's like sort of a wandering line. And we go back to the beginning again. So, in the next, we just go straight back into the same thing again. We start stacking. So, anyway, so all these tracks are mono guitar tracks. because, well, from a hardware standpoint, I use the TC Electronics RK5, which is they call it a fly rig. I can't pick it up because it's on the other side of the mic and it's all wired up. But it's just a little bar. It's about this big, maybe this deep, and kind of angled. I got the RK5 Mark II, so it's got an XLR out. That means that I'm getting no noise from the line, from like a coax line. It's all heavily shielded XLR balanced in to the audio interface, and it has on it. It's got the it's the Richie Kotzen model, so it's got his OMG, the OMG overdrive pedal. It's an overdrive and a fuzz. So if I'm looking off to the sides, because I'm looking at it, it has a boost / compressor. So all these have tiny little toggle switch buttons above them. So the boost is if you, so I'm assuming that he sets up the OMG, because he uses these live, just going straight into, he splits out the balanced output. Half of the split goes to just powered monitors on stage, and the other half goes to the board, to the mixing board, and allows that's really mature. So that allows your sound guy to mix the sound, and you're not constantly fighting with him because you're cranking up your amp on stage because you can't hear it over the drums. So you can go up and turn up your powered monitors for you to hear, and you're not going to screw over the sound guy. And I've been in the sound guy chair. I hate it. So has a boost so that you can kick in for solos. The boost also has is a compressor, so if you've got something that really needs to have compression instead of boost, you can click the little switch down and you get that. So in the case of like, so that was, you can hear it removes the attack, but it does make your notes sustain longer. And it's the way I have it set up too. There is a built-in tuner, which is seriously nice. So you can hold the button down and it will bring up the display for your tuning, and it's chromatic. Chromatic, and it shows you all 12 notes. There is the built-in, I wish I could read that, the built-in Sans amp. That makes everything especially nice. So if I was to, you can hear that now it just sounds like the guitar plugged directly in. The Sans amp circuit's really nice because it gives you that, it's a true amp sim. It's really nice. And then you can set it up. They've got all sorts of ways that you, settings so you can get it to sound more like an American amp, or an old Marshall. A modern boogie, like a solid state one, and so on and so on. But I've got it set up just to be a nice classic sort of midway between a Fender and a Marshall. There's the modulation section, which is a delay, and if you push the roto button down, it will do a sort of Phaco phasing rotary speaker effect that sounds really nice. It adds a nice bit of depth to it. So I almost, like, except for when I really need to just have, well, let's see, I'm using it right now. If you really need something direct, I forgot it now. Anyway, shows you how quickly things can escape your mind. But now, because it's really direct, it just has that very direct sound. But I really like the rotary effect. It's, I think, what really makes the pedal. Finally, so there's of course a reverb. There's a tap speed button. So if you got it set to delay, you can tap tempo, and you'll get the delay to sync up with how good you are at reading tempo. But this is it. So I've been using that. For the heavy guitar lines, what I did was I recorded the one track and then I duplicated it. That's what the little D is here. And then in the duplicate, to make it sound a little bit thicker and more stereo, I just sort of delayed. I pushed the timing back on the track by about 7 milliseconds. Very slight. It doesn't make it sound like you've got a slapback echo. It's just enough, and because there's no delays on this is a fairly straight, dry guitar signal. It gives you that stereo effect. Now, since then I picked up the Kemper. I'm considering going back and redoing a lot of this because there are mistakes. Although, my friend Andy Edwards and I have had discussions about the differences between what we consider, and I'll just bring it up briefly, and we can, if anybody's interested, we can talk about it at the end. Differences between modern prog and classic prog, or modern recording, modern music in the sense of pop or avant-garde or whatever, and what used to happen in the late 60s and throughout up to about the later 70s. That especially with bands like Yes, or even with Genesis. Genesis would seem like they would rehearse a lot of things, and they'd go in, and everything was pretty good. It was like as perfect as you could imagine from a performance. Pardon me. Yes, if you've ever gotten some of their later, like some of the deluxe versions of their albums where they've included rehearsal material, especially for I got the Relayer one, and the rehearsals for Relayer were almost unlistenable because it just felt like they had learned the parts, and I think they labeled it was their first time running through it, but it was just god awful because nobody was in sync. They were trying, everyone was trying different things. They tried their own things at home or whatever, and rehearsed them or even maybe didn't even rehearse them before coming in. They just had the ideas going, and came to the rehearsal studio, and it just sounded like a mess. You could kind of hear throughout the garbage what would eventually become Gates of Delirium, but oh my god, it was terrible. I couldn't listen to it, and I'm a big, huge Yes fan. So, and anyway, the point is that we've, as musicians and as producers and engineers, and even as an audience, we've come to expect a certain degree of perfection, and so we have these expectations on the musicians as an audience to say, these guys, that's their vocation. They are, they should be able to play this in their sleep, without without making any mistakes. That's, at least I've found myself at times saying that. The musicians have the pressure to say, well, we do not want to put anything that's a substandard product. So musicians and engineers and producers, being who they are, we tend to want everything to line up to a grid. Now, does that make good music? No, it does not. So right now, I've got this track is I'm targeting at, I'm hoping to get, I've talked to Thomas Lang. Thomas is very interested in doing stuff. Because of various things in the COVID thing and a radical change in employer for me, I've had to sort of stage out each individual that's been doing tracks for me. So Thomas, I'm hoping to get a hold of him this week and ask him to do this and one other track. I also have Mark Miller up in Seattle who's doing some session work with another named drummer that I'm not going to mention because it's still like, it was a suggestion, but no reply has come back from it, and I don't want to put anything in anybody's ears about it. But there's another fantastic drummer, American drummer, who would love to get involved in at least one track. Anyways, I want to get Thomas to come in. I'm going to essentially do the same thing I did with Andy and John Jowett and with Sean and another friend, Brian Timpey, up in Seattle, and my friend Mark, who's going to be playing bass as well, and Jeffrey, who's playing drums on a couple tracks as well. I'm just saying, look, you have free reign. Do what you feel. Take the material and think about what it needs and what would it need to elevate to the next level. Andy took the ball and ran with it and has returned like fantastic drum stems. And then John, I said the same thing. You can go online onto Facebook and check out Pareidolia, which I posted yesterday with John's bass tracks. It's starting to really come together. I just have to do lyrics and record vocals for that, but that's starting to sound absolutely fantastic. And that's one of the simpler tracks on the album, more groovy. So I'm counting on Thomas to come in here and just rip us a new one on this and totally turn this into something that I could never have imagined initially, especially, like I said, having come in and said, I'm learning how to play this guitar. And I'm only using this guitar on the entire piece. So that's gonna happen. And so, like I said, I'm debating whether or not to change this and redo the guitar tracks in the Kemper, because I've got a wider palette of things available, and I've got a whole bunch of vintage and modern amps at my disposal, profiles on the Kemper. But this thing right now just has such panache, or it's ostentatious, maybe is a better word to say. There's some things that I'm pushing my because it's a new instrument, and I'm all of a sudden, was like a year ago when I recorded this, I put it in my hands and said, in my own hands, and said, record something. I'm pushing the limits of my ability to grok the new scale, to grok how I need to play this, and it's always kind of on the edge of falling off. And even though I've got tons of little edits in here, there is nothing in here. I'm not going in and adjusting timing on anything. There's no warping of stuff. These are just multiple guitar takes that I've taken. And it wasn't like I did 22 entire song guitar takes. It was like, oh, I hated this. There's this. I fell off the rails at some point in the middle of this section here. So I'm gonna redo that, and I redid it from start to finish. And same thing here and here. Or I said, I've got an idea. I finished this just in the standard way that the previous one had been done, and then I said, well, I'm going to do something that's a little bit more dramatic, which is this. Or actually better, and yeah, that's true, because I wanted it to repeat in before going into the next section, or like this thing. Wanted to sound almost like unresolved and hanging, and what is it going to go to next? So there's like artistic choices or creative choices that were made here. Here it goes back to this thing a little bit at the beginning, and I programmed all the drums, so there's like a whole bunch of choices here that were made. So everything is just on the edge. Almost uninformed. And so by saying to Andy, to John, to Thomas, to Jimmy, and everybody, and saying, just do what you feel. Don't do what I programmed. do what you feel is right. It becomes more of a 70s style. It almost becomes like a Mahavishnu thing, which I know that, yes, we're trying to achieve. And so many bands were so influenced by Mahavishnu Orchestra. But by being able to say, this is what I've got as my piece, I'm not going to tell you what to play. I can tell you what time signature I played it in, but it's up to you to come up with your parts. It's then sounds more like a complete band piece. And that's I think always been my objective. That's always been the objective, is not to just come back and say, play what is recorded, I just want your drum sounds, or I just want how your drum feel, because then I could easily just go in and do a whole bunch of massive editing on the velocities and articulations in the MIDI drums, and come up with something that just sounds similar, but sounds more natural, but is not. I really wanted that sort of, I wanted Andy's brain. I wanted Andy's feel and his touch and into the music. I want Thomas's feel and touch. I want Jimmy's feel and touch, and Jimmy and Andy delivered. And so, and Jeffrey will deliver, and Thomas will deliver. I have every confidence that that's going to happen. So, coming back to this. So Thomas is going to be slated to do drums on this. Sean is slated to do bass on this. And so we've got what started off as a fairly simple riff, goes into this sort of, we end here, and it goes into something a bit quieter. And as you can see, if you can take a look here, you can see the synth pad sort of goes up and up and up in there to build tension. And this is just in straight 4. I can't remember the chords. Then we bring hi-hat. For the purposes of writing, I made it very repetitious. Again, Thomas, I'm hoping, is going to add a whole set of just panache and everything to it. Everything that is Thomas. And it's my almost brutal bass playing here. A lot of the parts that I put in tend to be really, I'm experimenting with ideas. Even though I've released this, those are not the finished bits. So we go down. I'm on the air. No. So this is live. My kid wants to come in. So then we get back to this, except again, it's a little more tense. We've done the electronic music drop to the previous section, and we've dropped even more. We're bringing in I like to call the evil choir. And we start adding little bits and pieces of percussion just to increase the tension. And just like in electronic music, you do the drop, and then you bring back the energy. Except I'm actually going to be, instead of building back to the original theme or to the intermediate theme, this is a whole new section, and I'm increasing the power here. I did the big organ gliss. Truly live with dog sound effects and everything in the background. Sorry, there's no dog sound effects on the album. And I'm really fond of the Hammond organ here. That's it. That's the piece. That is, you've just listened to, it took us an hour to go through 11 minutes and 38 seconds of music. So that's that with Thomas's live drumming, with Sean's, precision bass work, I think is going to just raise it to, again, I talk about like, we talk about atomic quantum levels, right? When we go to a different quantum state of energy with electrons, when we try to achieve this, when we go from I think it's the S1 orbital to the S2, and I don't remember all that stuff. I remembered it in high school and first year of university, but I remember from there vaguely. But it's been many years. I have not had to learn that, remember that stuff in so long. But every time you get into that more elevated state, the atom becomes slightly more unstable in the sense of it's at a higher energy level. So there's actually more potential energy. And every time we add a new person into the mix and their interpretation of it, we're elevating the piece of music to that next quantum level of energy. And so what started off as I believe it was, when I started writing all the music for this album, and this was fairly early in the process, I think I had Foucault's Pendulum was just a single piece with a bunch of, it was like a compound piece with a whole bunch of different pieces together in the middle, and some were a little bit sounded a little too close to what I had intended as an influence. So but when this was first written, I saw this as like the material was starting to sound good. It was going to be a very decent album, potentially better than A Fine Line Between, which I still think is a really decent album. There's some really good songs on there. Since then, it's funny. Creativity comes in waves, or inspiration comes in waves, and so. It went from being like about a 60-minute set of music when I split Foucault's Pendulum up and eliminated the things that people were pointing to and saying, hey, that sounds like Rush, or hey, that's, Andre, I think, said, hey, that sounds like my former boss, it's got a very Tarkus-like feel to it. And I get really scared when somebody can point directly to the song that I was that I had in the back of my mind, not fully intending to do in that exact fashion, but if it's sitting in the back of my mind, then it's pretty, and it's coming out that strongly, then it really needs to get removed. I need to get to be able to express myself, and I'm going to sit up straight. So, so the Foucault's Pendulum was split up into 3 different pieces. I had sort of a Pink Floyd-y influenced, but it didn't quite sound like Pink Floyd, or it wasn't a direct knockoff, in Dreamscape. And then Dreamscape, I wrote Dreamscape Level 2 on the classical guitar, and started sounding really good. And so all of a sudden you start feeling, oh wow, this is starting to be like a real album project that could potentially catch people's attention. And then I sent off some stuff to Andy. Andy returned the original 3 tracks that he worked on, which was Dreamscape Level 3, then Pareidolia, and Postscript. Postscript was the song that got written right after this one. Postscript was it starts starts off with something like this, but then I start bringing in other other influences, and it was intended to be the closing track on the album. So the Postscript got written. He sent back the stems for Postscript, and flying them in, and I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty amazing. I was working on, I had Foucault's Pendulum Part 2, which is going to be, of course, in the middle of the set of music, and I wasn't terribly happy with it. And then all of a sudden, so something like this, I think I said that like at the beginning, that the very beginning, the clean part here, if you look at my mouse cursor on the DAW, this clean part was done probably in an evening, just going like multiple times and finding the take that I liked and then saying, okay, I'm going to hang on to it, and if I find that it's really obscene or I get completely repulsed by it at some point, I'll redo it. I'll learn it and I'll do it properly. This actually was like, this whole thing probably took like a day and a half or 2 days to put together, because once you the next day came back, listened to this, and all of a sudden became very inspired to had something going, which was these parts, and then thought, well, what if I do this? What if I do 9/8/7? Or what if I do 5/4 and I have the bass actually being the only stringed instrument, and then the guitar coming in, and all these ideas start coming together, and you start putting things together, and before you know it, you essentially finished the piece. Postscript was the same way. It came about 3 or 4 days later. It's like, okay, well, there's things that I don't feel like I've done in this piece, but if I keep adding it, it's going to turn into another 20-minute epic. It's already 11.5 minutes. And I've got epics all over the place. So Postscript was, let's wrap it up. We'll think about using all the instruments that we used throughout the album, and then we'll change it to be a lot more sort of jazzy and accessible towards the end. I have more of a jazz influence, and so a jazz fusion-y influence. And so that went really quickly. And then, as I said, I started working on Foucault's Pendulum and Part 2, and the piece that I had laid out for Part 2 was only essentially the second half originally. That had started off with is going to be sort of Beach Boys-y style vocal harmonies that I use samples for the time being. And I thought that's just kind of a lame, weak way to start what's supposed to be like a pretty mighty instrumental song. So I was working on another piece that originally was using like a John Lord B3 sound. So it was called Deep Heavy Purple, and it turned into like something else entirely. Rich, let me put this away. I'm going to bring the acoustic out, but it's done on the Gibson ES235 because that's the closest I could get to a Steve Howe 175 sound. So deceiving, because it looks like I'm keeping the fingers in the same spot, because I could go, which is just sort of a D to E minor 7th sort of jam, but it's like E minor 7th, D, and that's an A power chord, but with the 6th there, and then that's a G, but so G with a D, G add D, G5 add D. So, and then and just to a straight old A chord. So. So that's the guitar. And then and this is just a C, but I'm pedaling on the A and suspending the E. So that's the C down to a G with a added third on top. And then this thing, which is the D with the B. D with a B that sounds kind of jazzy, and then I'm just playing, and that's just an A. So the whole riff is like. That's the sort of like, that's my pseudo-faco version of a Steve Howe sort of vamp. And the keyboard part is playing something very similar. The organ is playing something very similar on top. So it's almost like Yours Is No Disgrace in that regard. You can hear the organ playing the chord. Anyway, never learned the song. I'm just going based on what I think I remember. So it starts off with that. And I wrote the whole thing out. It has incredible twists and turns through it. Put in a sort of like a country. Which incidentally is the this. For sharp-eared people, that is that's the main heavy rock guitar part from part 1 and the end of part 3. So it's like. So again, these little, there's a lot of little sort of wink and a nod back to earlier bits in the piece, but this whole Foucault's Pendulum Part 2 went from a 6-minute piece up to 15 minutes. I threw it Andy's way because we'd only really agreed that he could do 3 pieces for me. Based on his time, but of course COVID means that we got a lot more time available to us. And so I said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And he listened to the thing. He said, this is wonderful. I think I really want to do this. And so so he did. And throughout the recording sessions that we had with Andy, he started off with playing like he did Pareidolia first, which is fairly straight, and then Postscript was Postscript was third, so it was Dreamscape was second, and he started adding in a lot more of his own stuff. And during that time I said, go crazy, polyrhythms all over the place if you want. I don't care. I really want to hear, I want you to go nuts on it. And so he started doing some really interesting stuff in the Dreamscape level 3 things. Then PostScript comes out, and there's some really cool stuff there. And then finally, he says, "Oh, I can really go to town on this, on the Foucault's Pendulum Part 2," and he did. He went crazy. We were having problems with him receiving and being able to import the tempo tracks, which means that he's essentially listening to the music and trying to draw the tempo out from the tunes. And he also, what he did was he did very little listening and only just sort of, and I think I mentioned this in the track posting, was he started using colors to describe what kind of playing he would do for each section. And so it's meant that there's a couple places where he's either ahead or behind where the meter would be, but those are pretty minor. If I can fix things by in milliseconds so that they don't make a big difference. And I'm looking in the direction of the microphone so you can hear me clearly. I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring the camera. But the I can move things around. I can do warps and things in milliseconds, and I can adjust things and make them get into time. I know that we've been going back and forth, but the biggest challenge was we're all recording at home. Recording drums at home is one of the biggest challenges of all, because where Andy's recording, he's got the drums set up right beside, it looks like a bookcase, which is great because the books, even though they've got their hardcovers and there's wood and everything, it's an irregular surface and it's of varying density. So you don't end up with these harsh reflections coming back at the microphones. So I'm getting a pretty decent signal. The biggest challenge is when you're running your microphones at home, you're usually running them directly into your interface and then going into your Mac or your MacBook or your PC like me. And usually in a studio, you're able to do all sorts of funky things to like reposition and re-aim the microphone so that you're not picking up an excessive amount of ride cymbal, or you're not getting if the microphone on the floor tom is aimed like this at the floor tom, you're also getting some wash from the snare drum. The snare drum will get wash from the hi-hat, when the hi-hat will be also picking up snare drum and kick drum and all sorts of these, wild inconsistencies. And so we end up, you can take two paths. There's two paths you can go by, but in the long run, you can take the files as they are, try and put them in and just and live with it, or you can be anally retentive, as we've said that people are bound to do. And I've fallen into that trap at times during this recording and during the mixing sessions, where I've tried to eliminate the bleed as much as possible. And then we have a discussion, and it's like, well, it's we're going to start now. The next thing you're going to do is start quantizing everything, and the next thing you're going to do is start replacing my bits with triggered drums. And it's like, and then I feel guilty. It's like, no, I can't do that. That's totally beyond my intent. And so I end up going back, and the last few mixes that I've been doing have sort of embraced the wildness of the situation. And yes, we are starting to sound very much more like a traditional 70s style output. The drums are sounding fantastic. I'm quite pleased. I've taken, Jimmy provided me with a tip on what, because he was sending me back the early sort of his own mixes with the files I sent him, where he would let me listen to it, audition it in context, and say, is it good or not? And then I would get the files and I'd import them, and I'd go, why the hell do my mixes sound shittier than yours? And yours are probably just faders up. And he's like, well, I've been using this VST. And so I find out, conveniently at that exact moment that he told me what it was, I look at plugin Alliance, and it's on sale for $30. Normally $300. It's on sale for $30, and I've got a coupon for it. So I, go rush out over to the website and buy it and install it, and then I think, well, if it, Jimmy's got a complex setup that's in his basement of his new house that he hasn't fully set up sound dampening in his project studio yet, and it's sounding good there. Why don't I incorporate that stuff into Andy's drums? And I start playing around with EQ a lot more than I've been accustomed to, because EQ will do weird things like it will put things out of phase if you are too heavy-handed with it. So I started judiciously using EQ, and all of our temptations on our home stereos are to put on the music and go, oh, it sounds kind of dead and flat. Crank up the treble, crank up the bass, and all of a sudden it's got life to it. EQ in the studio is quite the opposite. You should be doing subtractive EQ and not addition EQ as much as possible. So I went through Andy's drums. In the early tracks, he had a different ride cymbal that had some harsh overtones that were coming through. So, used the notch filter and swept across, found where the sweet spot was, and notched that frequency out on Tom 3 and Tom 4. Did the same with some of the other ones, and all of a sudden I've got this sweet sounding set of drums. And then, so this has been an education. John Jawad and I, John's not has confessed that he's not technically adept, and now the cat wants to come in. John confessed he's not technically adept, so I have my work lab, my MacBook, and I know that John is using Logic, so installed Logic Pro on my MacBook and set up his projects for him, and sent them along to John, and so. And then John picked up a new interface for himself, SSL desktop interface with a very large knob on it. It's very nice, and so a very large knob, and so the tracks he sent yesterday were stunning. They just the richness of them and the fullness of them is just beautiful. So. Much better than what I've been getting out of my Made in Mexico J bass or the Warwick bass that I've got. It just got beautiful tone. So flew it in, did some limiting on it, and added Lamb of God, not Lamb of God, the Voice of God. Plug-in to enhance the sub-lows a tiny little bit, and all of a sudden I've got this like stunning track. And a bit of compression. So it's just things of I'm starting to learn a lot about a lot more than I've known before about how to do this stuff, and then and then everybody else is too. Think that there was a statement made that I read from some other musicians that are in the sort of LA area that said this is kind of a scary time, should be a scary time for studios, because this, we've been in lockdown for 2.5 months, and the musicians can't, the ones especially who have to play live in order to be able to survive, are learning how to do session work at home, are learning how to write and compose material, and learning just how amazing the freedom is of having everything on your home desktop and being able to do all the stuff at home, learning basic miking techniques. And we're teaching each other, going on to YouTube and watching. I'm gaining a huge perspective on music theory from watching Rick Beato. I'm gaining a huge perspective on just studio playing attitude and owning your performance from Tim Pierce. Fantastic videos that he does. There's a whole lot of other stuff. Universal Audio, Waves, Arturia. A lot of the companies are putting out videos produced at home, just like this, that are instructing people how to get better sounds from the limited gear they have at home. You don't have to have you don't have to use a multi-million-dollar studio to put together good music. You can do things at home. I don't want to undermine the studios, because there's definitely a case where the studio, you can only get like the specific type of polished music out of a studio much better than you can at home. But from a creative perspective, being able to do something more of an agile fashion to you know, there in the recent past, you hear about these guys that an album takes 2 or 3 years to produce. By the time they've released the album, they've already moved on, probably, like spiritually or technically, or in terms of their listening interest. They've already moved on to whatever's next, but they've got to now go out and tour and support this album. And in that regard, the middle period King Crimson stuff, I mean, there's 2 years there, and they released like 4 albums that and a lot of it was improvisational. A lot of it was, music on the fly. There's other things that got released where the recording time took only 3 weeks from start to finish, and it was an intricately done album. It was, well thought out. The mix is great. They only had 16 or 24 tracks available, so like, how much more could you do to it to make it to make it perfect? You couldn't, the quote that I read was, they're looking at their master tape and they're seeing all this little white tapes as they're playing the master tape back at the very end to do the final approval of what they've done, and all they see is white edit tape where they've been just sitting and editing bits and pieces of stuff together. And I mean, when you have to go through that much bother, that much inconvenience, and every time you do a physical tape edit, you're compromising the integrity of the tape. No matter how careful you are, no matter how precise you are in anything, you're compromising the physical integrity of the tape. And so that imposes a great deal of restriction on you as to how much precision and how anal retentive you can get about it. In the electronic form, I mean, you take a look at this right there. Unlimited number of tracks. You're restricted simply by how big is your hard drive. How much stuff can you store? How many tracks can your PC or your MacBook play simultaneously is restricted by how powerful your CPU and how much memory, onboard memory, you have on the system. But if you've got a powerful enough system, and my system's starting to get like it's 2 years old now, or a year old. It's starting to get I'm feeling like with the new generation of hardware, it's maybe going to be a bit out of date. But I still have capabilities I could never dream of when I was working at CHRW in London, Ontario, Canada, in the production studio with a 8-channel, 8-track Onkyo multi-track deck, a big Tascam board, and like 2 compressors, 2 Uri compressors. There and a Yamaha SPX 90 Mark II. I mean, the limitations there meant that anything that we produced there, you had to know ahead of time. Even when I had my PC, my 486 loaded with Mastertrax Pro, and I had 16 channels 16 MIDI channels that I could then program everything on. That's still a severe limitation. That ensures that you make sure only the right stuff gets onto the recording. With everything that we've got available today, we spend way too much time obsessing over the finer details when we should just be writing, recording, playing the music, and getting it out there as quickly as possible. So, I mean, that's also what's making these concerts from home successful, is that people are recognizing that I can just play guitar and not have to worry about the details. So. I did promise I was going to play some. I think with that, I'm going to bid adieu for today. Thanks a lot to everybody that's joining me. I really, really appreciate you being patient and waiting. I was an hour and a half late, so I played an extra half an hour than what I normally do, and I chatted. And I hope to actually to sort of kick this allergy thing out soon and be able to wake up on time. It's affecting my day-to-day life. But I also want to wish everybody the best of health. Take care of yourselves. Don't do anything silly. My son's been wearing his mask around the house. I'm like, don't wear the mask around the house. You actually will make yourself more sick. But let's be safe when we go out. Let's maintain social distancing. 6 feet should be sufficient. We don't wear the masks for ourselves. We wear them for everybody else. Because as asymptomatic carriers, whether we know it or not, if we are or we aren't asymptomatic carriers, we need to be able to make sure that we protect our fellow citizens on this planet and stop the transmission of this disease. The suggestion that ultraviolet radiation will kill the virus in exposure of light means we should maybe get outside more. I'm going to go out and spend some time. I try and spend at least 15 minutes just out in the sun, absorbing on one of my chairs, absorbing some vitamin D, and trying to maintain sanity. And then lastly, don't drink bleach. Don't eat Tide Pods. Don't ingest Lysol. There's several arguments about using hand sanitizer to wash your hands. I think soap and water is what everybody's recommending. We don't need to kill every little bit of bacteria or virus that's on our skin. We do need to have some sort of natural ability to fight these things off. Soap and water will suffice. Soap and warm water will suffice. 20 seconds. Scrub underneath your fingernails, just like they show. My wife's an RN, and she has to remind all of us all the time to do this. But just be smart, right? When I come in from the market, I mean, it's a ritual. We take off our clothes when we come in from work, or like when my wife comes back from the hospital, she'll take off her scrubs and put them in the laundry. I'll take off my clothes when I'm coming back from the market. Probably don't really have to, but I'll take my clothes off and put them in the hamper and get them ready for the wash. The If we're smart in our day-to-day lives, we can do our best to not only avoid transmission between each other, but avoid getting sick ourselves. And because there's a suspicion that myself and my kids and my wife got sick with this early in the year, like around the New Year's time frame. But we don't want to take any risks. We had all the symptoms that they've mentioned are part of this illness, and we got better. I know that my energy level just sucked, and it was tough to breathe for weeks after. But I feel I'm far better now. I've definitely noticed that my lung capacity's gotten better. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm going to be stupid. I'm not going to go out there and risk myself getting it potentially a second time, like I said, some people can, or carrying it around and giving it to somebody else who didn't get sick, particularly the really young or the really old. So please stay healthy. I love you all. I love this planet. Obviously, it sustains us. But I particularly like even the difficult people who I may not agree on political views and stuff with. I still appreciate the interaction. It keeps the blood flowing. So let's make sure that we all stay alive and that we don't get each other sick. And bless you all, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.